When people think of the outlands, once called the plane of concordant opposition on some prime material planes, they think of the city of Sigil, which exists at the very center of the multiverse. Called the City of Doors, it contains portals to all of the outer planes, and its citizens hail from all parts of the multiverse. The outlands contain other wonders as well. There are the gate towns, each built around a gate to a particular plane. The gate towns exist in a peculiar situation. The gate's influence molds a city into a reflection of the plane it leads to, but if it becomes too similar, it will be absorbed into the plane, leaving the gate behind where a new city will eventually be built. To prevent this, ideologies contrary to the nature of the city are tolerated and in some cases even encouraged. It is a delicate balance that the rulers of the gate towns struggle to maintain. Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Dungeon Crashers. I'm Guy.
And I'm Zapil. Before we get started, please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our exciting D&D content. Today we are starting our look at the material in Planescape. It is an interesting book for character building. It doesn't have many new options, but the ones it does have a lot of variety in them. Someone could run dozens of campaigns in the setting and never build the same character twice. The two new backgrounds are Gate Warden and Planar Philosopher. Gate Wardens are those who live in the gate towns and are used to dealing with planar visitors. Planar Philosophers are members of various factions in the city of Sigil. There's a gate town for each outer plane, and a character from Ribcage that is connected to the Nine Hells would be very different from a resident of Ecstasy, which is connected to Elysium. Today's character is a resident of Hopeless, which is built around the gate to Hades. It is a bleak city arranged in a spiral with a single entrance. Those who choose to reside in Hopeless are those who have nowhere else to go. The influence of Hades has the effect on the people of giving them extreme pallor and, in some cases, light sensitivity. Bright lights and bright colors are forbidden. While the city tends towards evil, it is a lazy, unambitious sort of evil. Despair is far more common than villainy, but even in such a place, good can flourish, sometimes in an unlikely individual. We are using the Gate Warden background. It gives the skills Persuasion and Survival, and 2 languages of your choice, with Abyssal, Celestial, and Infernal being recommended. Our hero, being from Hopeless, speaks Infernal and Abyssal with equal fluency. He can also find free food and lodging within the town of Hopeless if needed. He gets the Scion of the Outer Planes feat. This feat gives him a connection to the outer plane, in his case Hades, and it gives a resistance to the damage type and a cantrip known depending on the alignment of the plane. Outland is considered true neutral, and the other planes have 1 or 2 dominant alignments. Hades is considered evil aligned, but the 9 hells are lawful and evil, so a character can choose from either. Our hero has a connection to Hades, so he chooses the evil-aligned plane option, which gives him resistance to necrotic damage and the Chill Touch cantrip. He can cast this cantrip without material components and can use Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma as the casting stat, and he chooses Charisma. For the race, we are choosing the Reborn lineage from von Richtenstein's Guide to Ravenloft. This is one of the ways to play as a sort of undead in 5e, the other being a Dhampir. Reborn is intended to be like a zombie, but free-willed and sapient. Despite their resemblance to undead, their type is humanoid, but they do have several undead-like traits. They have advantage on death saves, saving throws against disease and poison, as well as a resistance to poison damage. They don't need to sleep, eat, drink, or breathe. At least they don't need to, so it's up to you if you want them to. They also have knowledge from the past life. A number of times per long rest equal to their proficiency modifier, they can add a d6 to an ability check that uses a skill. They roll the d6 immediately after seeing the d20 roll, but before they know if it succeeds. They also have ancestral legacy. This lineage can be taken after the character creation. If they do, they lose most of the traits of the original race and replace them with the reborn traits, but keep any racial proficiencies and swim or fly speeds. If it is taken at character creation, they instead get 2 skills, and he takes Athletics and Arcana. Their size is medium or small, depending on what they were before becoming reborn. In either case, their walking speed is 20 feet. Reborn don't sleep, instead they set and dwell on the past, hoping to reconnect with their living self. They can complete a long rest in 4 hours in an inactive, motionless state. Reborn get the ability score bonuses common with the newer races, which are 3+1 bonuses they can put wherever they want, but no more than 2 on the same ability. Using the point buy system, he puts a 15 on strength, making it 17 with 2 bonus points. We put an 8 on dexterity. His reborn nature makes him stiff and awkward. He puts a 14 on constitution. His nature also makes him tough and hardy. We put an 8 on intelligence. His mind is fractured, and whatever education he had only comes to him in flashes. We put a 10 on wisdom. We would like more, but he is proficient with wisdom saves and will eventually have aura of protection. And we put 15 on charisma, making it 16 with the last bonus point. It's going to be his casting stat and power his aura of protection. He has an intense force of personality, making him both persuasive and intimidating.
Our hero wasn't born in Hopeless, nor did he travel here. He just appeared. Some think he is a petitioner, a soul confined to the afterlife. These aren't uncommon in Outland, although it's typically the true neutral dead that end up here. If this is the case, it's a mystery how an apparent undead came to be here. At first, the bleakness of the town appealed to him. It matched the melancholy that he felt about everything. But over time, he began to resent it. In his memories, he had flashes of a life of color and brightness. He remembered being a hero, but not what cause he served. He remembers a queen. He remembers loving her, but can't see her face. He tried to emulate what he saw of his former self, and realized he knew how to fight. He knew a variety of weapons, and he felt comfortable in armor. He remembered an oath to a queen to conquer enemies and to fight evil. Our hero begins play as a paladin, getting 2 skills from their list, and he takes intimidation and insight. He is proficient with all weapons, armor, and shields, as well as wisdom and charisma saves. He has divine sense. He can detect fiends, celestials, and undead within 60 feet that aren't behind total cover, and he can also detect desecrated and consecrated areas. He gains lay on hands, which is a pool of hit points equal to 5 times his paladin level. He can use an action to spend points from the pool to heal that number of hit points. Also, he can spend 5 points as part of the same action to cure 1 poison or disease affecting the person. He begins with chainmail, a halberd, 5 javelins, and a mace. He doesn't really need the javelins as he has the chill touch cantrip, but at low levels the javelins would do more damage since he can add his strength bonus. At 2nd level, he becomes a 2nd level paladin. He gets a fighting style and he chooses defense, getting +1 to his armor class while wearing armor. We think this is better than great weapon fighting for a polearm user. When using a single large dice, rerolling 1s isn't a huge benefit compared to when rerolling 2d6 with a greatsword, and the armor class boost will compensate a little for not having a shield. He also gets spellcasting, getting 2 first-level spell slots, and can prepare spells from the Paladin list. He can prepare a number of spells equal to half his Paladin level rounded down, plus his Charisma modifier, so 4 for now. He prepares Divine Favor, which adds a d4 radiant damage to all of his weapon attacks, Command, which is a powerful and versatile spell, Shield of Faith, which he can use to enhance his defense instead of his attacks, and Cure Wounds to supplement his lay on hands. Instead of casting spells, he can use his spell slots for Divine Smite. When he hits with a weapon attack, he can spend a spell slot and add 1d8 to the damage, plus an additional d8 per level of the spell slot. At 3rd level, he gains Divine Health, giving him immunity to disease, and he takes a Sacred Oath. He renews the vow he took in life and takes the Oath of Conquest. He gains the use of Channel Divinity each rest, and 2 ways to use it. The first is Guided Strike. When making an attack roll, he can use his Channel Divinity to add +10 to the attack roll. This is really nice, almost guaranteeing a hit, but he is more likely to use the second option, which is Conquering Presence. As an action, he can force each creature of his choice within 30 feet to make a wisdom save against his spell DC, or become frightened of him for 1 minute. The creature can make another save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a success. He also gets Oath spells, which are always prepared and don't count against the number of spells he can prepare. At this level, the spells are Armor of Agathis and Command. Armor of Agathis is an excellent spell, giving temporary hit points and punishing those who attack him. Since Command is now an Oath spell for him, he can replace it with something else. Wrathful Smite would be another way to frighten enemies, so he takes that, but it does use concentration, so use it before casting a spell like Divine Favor or Shield of Faith. At 4th level, he becomes a 4th level Paladin, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes Baleful Scion, which is another new feat from Planescape. To take it, he must be 4th level and have the Scion of the Outer Planes feat and have chosen an evil-aligned plane. It allows him to increase any ability score by 1, and he makes his strength 18, and it gives him Grasp of Avarice. Once per turn, when he damages a creature, he can add 1d6 plus his proficiency modifier in necrotic damage to the target, and regain that many hit points. He can use this ability a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier. This would be a nice addition to a critical smite, or on top of a chill touch. It also says once per turn, not once on his turn, so he could even add it to the damage someone takes from his Armor of Agathis. As he has gained an even paladin level, he can prepare one more spell. Searing Smite would be a good choice. The smite spells can be good in the right situations, but it's often better to just use the spell slot for Divine Smite. If you find that you aren't using them very often, Bless could be a nice alternative.
Years go by, or at least as far as he could tell. Time is strange in the Outlands, even more so in Hopeless. He has begun to use his warrior skills and has acquired armor and weapons. The town is a den of evil, so much that evil is boring. Vices are commonplace but pursued unenthusiastically. Slavery is legal, but so is slave rebellion. Thievery is common, but people have little to steal. Occasionally night hags and mezzademons pass through, but rarely stay long. At first he gained work as a bodyguard, protecting the wealthier residents and their possessions, but found this unsatisfying. He was paid well, but found no joy in his work. He took to covertly hunting down the more evil of the residents. Not the common sort, but the rare ambitious evil, slave traders and serial killers. He did take satisfaction in this, but felt that he was only treating the symptom, not the disease. He began to look at the rulers of Hopeless as the real evil in the city. He believed that if they could be removed, the city would be pulled away from the influence of Hades. Maybe enough to allow joy and color to return at least a little. At 5th level, he becomes a 5th level paladin, gaining extra attack. Now when he takes the attack action, he can attack twice instead of once. He gains a 4th 1st level spell slot and 2 2nd level spell slots and can prepare 2nd level spells. He stops preparing Cure Wounds and prepares Prayer of Healing. He also trades Searing Smite for Branding Smite. His oath spells at this level are Spiritual Weapon and Hold Person. Spiritual Weapon can be a good use of his bonus action, and Hold Person is great. His spell DC is lower than a peer caster of his level is likely to be, but if Hold Person sticks, the enemy is in serious trouble. All hits on a held enemy are critical hits, which double all dice, including Divine Smite and Grasp of Avarice. His Chill Touch improves here. It now deals 2d8 necrotic damage, making it generally more effective than a javelin for his ranged attack. But depending on the situation, it's possible for him to throw 2 javelins. At 6th level, he becomes a 6th level paladin, gaining Aura of Protection. Whenever he or a friendly creature within 10 feet makes a saving throw, they can add his charisma modifier to the roll. This is one of the best things about being a paladin, along with Divine Smite. Since he gained an even number level, he should prepare Lesser Restoration or Gentle Riposte. Most of the paladin spell slots are used for smiting, so he doesn't need a lot of combat spells, and can prepare healing and support spells to use after the battle with, if any spell slots he has left. At 7th level, he becomes a 7th level paladin. From Oath of Conquest, he gains Aura of Conquest. The aura extends 10 feet, and a creature in the aura that is frightened of him has his movement speed reduced to 0. In each turn, it takes psychic damage equal to half his paladin level. He has his Channel Divinity and Wrathful Smite to make creatures frightened. If he has a creature frightened, he can use one of his attacks to shove them prone, and with a movement of speed of 0, they won't be able to get back up, letting him attack with advantage. He also gets a 3rd 2nd level spell slot. At 8th level, he becomes an 8th level paladin, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Polearm Master feat. This gives him a few abilities. First, when a creature enters his reach, it provokes an attack of opportunity. Second, when he takes the attack action with the polearm, he can use his bonus action to make an attack with the haft of the weapon that deals 1d4 bludgeoning damage. His weapon is a halberd, which has spikes on the top and back of the axe head. A DM could house rule that the player with the halberd could make a bonus action attack with the spike, dealing 1d4 piercing damage instead. It would make the ability more powerful, except in certain situations involving damage resistance. It's mostly for style and to reflect how a halberd is used. Having a bonus action attack not only gives another chance to hit and deal damage, it's also another chance to smite, and if the enemy is held, it will also be another critical hit. Since he gained an even-numbered Paladin level, he can prepare one more spell, and it should be either Lesser Restoration or Gentle Riposte, whichever you didn't take last time.
His vigilante work has had a positive effect on the town of Hopeless. Things are a little more peaceful, and people are going about their lives with a little more enthusiasm. To his surprise, no guardsmen have come looking to catch him. The apathy of the ruler is apparently so strong they won't even take action against threats to their rule. He increased the pace of his operation now, targeting officials who abuse their power, pimps, and sellers of narcotics. When he took his rest, he still had flashes of memories from his old life, but now he was seeing other things as well. He imagined he was being visited by the spirits of those who had been victimized by the villains he killed. Ghosts seemed to come to him, thanking him for avenging them and helping them to move on to the afterlife they are meant to find. In time, he began to believe that it wasn't just imagination, that the spirits of the dead were really visiting him and giving thanks. All doubt was removed one evening when he returned to his home to find a ghost hovering in the middle of his little house. He could see his fire flickering through the spirit. Unlike the others, it spoke clearly without hesitation. It said, "Greetings, great hero, I am Thanta. You have done a great service freeing the spirits of the victims from the chains that bind them to this realm. I would reward you and offer my assistance." He thought to himself that he should be frightened. This was no normal spirit. But life near the gate to Hades had made him used to seeing fearful things, and in truth he was a fearsome sight himself. So he asked the lady ghost what sort of aid she offered. She explained that she had been trapped here longer than this version of Hopeless had existed. The city had risen and fallen many times since her death, and she had drawn power from the gate and grown mighty. She wants to pull the city away from the influence of Hades. She believes if the city is once again absorbed into the gate, the cycle will begin again, and it might be millennia before another such as himself comes along. She tells him if he will help her with this, she will lend him part of her power. Since her goals were similar to his, and he was in truth feeling lonely in his life, he agreed, and a pact was formed. At 9th level, he becomes a first-level warlock with the Undead patron. As a warlock, he gains pact magic. He gains one pact magic spell slot. This is separate from his paladin slots and recovers on a short rest rather than a long rest. He can use an arcane focus for his warlock spells instead of material components, and he can perform somatic components with the same hand he holds the arcane focus with. This means he only needs one hand free for casting, so will not have to drop his weapon to cast spells. He learns 2 cantrips and 2 first-level spells from the warlock list. For the cantrips, he chooses Eldritch Blast and Toll the Dead. Eldritch Blast will in most cases replace Chill Touch as his range attack, but there are still times when Chill Touch will be useful. Toll the Dead is useful against targets that are hard to hit with an attack roll, but it isn't necessary. If you prefer something like Mage Armor or Minor Illusion, it could be more useful. We chose Toll the Dead because it suits the character, and he doesn't seem like the type to be doing subtle things. As an Undead Warlock, the spells Bane and False Life are added to the Warlock spell list for him. For spells, he takes Cause, Fear, and Hex, and will stop preparing Divine Favor as a Paladin and replace it with something else. Hex will not only work with his weapon attacks, but with each beam of his Eldritch Blast, adding a lot of damage. Cause Fear is another way for him to frighten a creature. Like Hex, it uses his concentration, so we'll have to choose one or the other, but with his Aura of Conquest, frightening a creature is very powerful. As an Undead Warlock, he gains Form of Dread. A number of times per day equal to his proficiency modifier, he can assume this form for 1 minute. When doing so, he appears spectral and translucent like his ghostly patron, and gains the following benefits. He gains 1d10 plus his warlock level and temporary hit points. It's important to remember that temporary hit points don't stack. The new ones replace any old ones. So if he's using Armor of Agathis, this would effectively end that spell. He becomes immune to the Frightened condition, and once during each of his turns, when he hits with an attack, he can cause the creature he hit to make a Wisdom save against his spell DC, and if it fails, it's frightened of him until the start of his next turn. With his Aura of Conquest, this can cripple a creature for as long as it keeps failing its saving throws. At 10th level, he becomes a 2nd level warlock gaining Eldritch Invocations, which are gifts from his patron that increase his power. He chooses Agonizing Blast, which every warlock should. It adds his Charisma modifier to the damage of each beam of his Eldritch Blast, which makes it considerably better. Even a warlock like himself that is a melee fighter and only uses Eldritch Blast for targets he can't get close to, he still wants this. And the second is Devil's Sight. It lets him see normally in darkness, even magical darkness, at a range out to 120 feet. By itself, this is already an excellent ability, but gets better if he gets a way to create magical darkness, and even better if he has allies that can also see in magical darkness. He gets a 2nd pact magic slot and can learn another warlock spell, and he learns Bane. This is another good way to cripple an enemy, but like many of his spells require concentration, so he needs to pick a strategy and stick to it at the start of a fight. At 11th level, he becomes a 3rd level Warlock, getting a Pact boon. Normally a melee fighter would take Pact of the Blade, but he really doesn't need it. He already has extra attack. Instead, he chooses Pact of the Chain. His patron sends a companion to aid him. He learns the Find Familiar spell and can cast it as a ritual. It doesn't count against the spells he knows. When casting it, instead of the normal familiars, he can choose an imp, pseudo-dragon, quasit, or sprite. He chooses an imp. If your DM is cool with it, and many are, you can homebrew a special familiar that has a similar power level but suits an undead patron. If you do, try and keep the Devil's Sight ability because it'll be useful. A ghost that follows him around would be very thematic. When he takes the attack action, he can give up one of his attacks to allow the familiar to attack with its reaction. This can be good as imps have a potent tail attack, but the save DC is terrible, so for now it's probably not worth it. Imps can also turn invisible at will until it attacks or has its concentration broken. Combined with its ability to fly, this makes it an excellent scout. His pack magic slots become 2nd level, and he learns another spell that can be 2nd level. As an undead warlock, the spells Blindness, Deafness, and Phantasmal Force are added to the warlock list for him. He learns Mirror Image, which is a powerful defense that doesn't require concentration and will look really cool when he's in his ghostly form. He can also replace a spell he knows with a different one, and he retrains Bane for Darkness, which allows both he and his imp to benefit from Devil's Sight, creating an area where they can see normally but most enemies can't. His cantrips improve as well. Chill Touch and Toll the Dead get a 3rd dice of damage, and Eldritch Blast gets a 3rd beam. At 12th level, he becomes a 4th level Warlock, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he increases his charisma to 18. He is becoming more reliant on magic, and pumping up his attack roll and save DC is important. Improving his intimidation, persuasion, and aura protection are also great benefits. He learns another spell that can be 2nd level, and he takes Phantasmal Force. This is a powerful way to take an enemy out of a fight and even deal damage to it, and now he has enough save DC to make it effective. He also learns another cantrip and takes Friends, which can further improve his persuasion and intimidation, as long as he isn't concerned about the consequences.
Though he has made some strides in improving the situation of the people of Hopeless, he was working against powerful forces, the High Cardinal, Thingol the Mocking. She is a powerful wizard, and her Befolder servants patrol the city looking for signs of disobedience. He has so far avoided their attention, but any attempt on Thingol herself would certainly bring them down on him. He knew he needed more power to face her, but he also needed to hurry. Thingol has responded to a small increase of happiness and motivation in the city by increasing her cruelty. Weekly, if not daily, she unveils a new work of art, which always involves a person that had been tortured or mutilated in horrible ways. Word on the street is that the Cardinal has taken notice of the vigilante as well. He has been careful to leave no survivors to report on him, and has kept himself cowled so that even under the effects of Speak with Dead, his victims could only describe him a little. Perhaps in the mortal world, a hulking zombie-like man in plate armor would stand out regardless of mask or cloak, but in a place like Hopeless, he wasn't as unusual as one would expect. Even though it is risky, he knew he would need allies if he was going after the High Cardinal, so he began searching for individuals who were strong enough to be useful, but also can be trusted to not betray him. A difficult task in a place like this. At 13th level, he becomes a 5th level Warlock. His spell slots become 3rd level, and he can learn another spell of up to 3rd level. As an Undead Warlock, the spells Phantom Steed and Speak with Dead are added to the Warlock list for him, and he takes Summon Undead. He needs allies, and being able to summon one will do in a pinch. The ghostly version would be appropriate, and it can cause fear to enemies. These enemies fear the undead, not him, so won't be affected by the aura, but it's still effective. He can also retrain a spell, and he trades Cause Fear for Fear, which affects multiple creatures. He also gets another invocation, and he takes Investment of the Chainmaster. It gives him an imp or familiar a fly or swim speed of 40 feet. Since an imp already flies, it gives him a swim speed. The familiar's weapon attacks are considered magical for the purposes of overcoming damage resistance and immunity. When the familiar takes damage, he can use his reaction to give it resistance to that damage. If the familiar forces a creature to make a save, such as from the imp's poison, it uses the Warlock's save DC instead of its own, and can use his bonus action to cause the familiar to take the attack action. This feat is vital to chain Warlocks. It turns a familiar from a useful scout to a combatant. He could, if he wanted, uses his bonus action to make it attack, then give up one of his attacks to have the imp attack with its reaction. And its poison is now a real threat instead of just an annoyance. He has a lot of uses for his bonus action, so won't always want to do that, and it will also often be better for him to make his attacks himself. However, the flexibility is incredible. He can also have the imp use its help action, just as a wizard with a normal familiar, giving him advantage on his attacks. Since the help action doesn't cause the imp to become visible, he could use this very effectively. At 14th level, he becomes a 6th level Warlock. He learns another spell of up to 3rd level, and he takes Speak with Dead, allowing him to gain valuable information. Zone of Truth is on the Paladin list, so he could prepare that as well, and depending on the DM, he could use the Friends cantrip to help intimidate or persuade the corpse to answer him. From his patron, he gains Grave Touched. The first part of this ability is irrelevant to him, as he already doesn't need to eat, sleep, or breathe, but the second part is interesting. When he hits a creature with an attack and rolls damage, he can change the damage type to necrotic. Used with his halberd, this could get around the damage resistance of some creatures and exploit any weaknesses to the necrotic damage the creature might have. This is less useful than its Eldritch Blast, since it already deals force damage, which is rarely resisted, but there are times it could be good, especially with the second part of this ability. Once per turn, when he is using his form of Dread and deals necrotic damage, he can roll an additional dice of damage. He could also add his Grasp of Avarice and Smite if he really wants to lay the smackdown. At 15th level, he becomes a 7th level Warlock. His spell slots become 4th level, and he can learn another spell of up to 4th level. As an Undead Warlock, the spells Greater Invisibility and Death Ward are added to the Warlock list for him, but he takes Blight. He doesn't have a good area of effect attack, and this will remedy that. He can also retrain a spell, and he trades Darkness for Shadows of Moil. This heavily obscures him, giving all the advantages of being invisible. It also turns dim light within 10 feet to darkness and bright light to dim light. He has resistance to radiant damage, and when a creature within 10 feet of him hits him with an attack, the shadows deal 2d8 necrotic damage to them. This has great synergy with his Devil Sight, his Aura of Conquest, and his Form of Dread, making him very difficult to hit, punishing people for hitting him and locking opponents down with fear and dealing ongoing psychic damage to them. Add Mirror Image, and you are nearly invulnerable to attacks and look really scary. To be even scarier, he gets another invocation and he takes Cloak of Flies. This suits his style and gives him advantage on intimidation checks at the cost of disadvantage on other charisma checks, and creatures within 5 feet of him take necrotic damage when they start their turn there, equal to his charisma modifier.
Things are coming to a head in Hopeless. The Grand Cardinal has become concerned about his activities and has her beholders on high alert. The beholders have also begun committing atrocities in order to draw him out, and it was effective, but not in the way they had hoped. Just as the Mocker patrolled the city with her beholders, he did the same with his imp, following the creatures until he found one alone and unprepared. He knew he had to act quickly before it could bring its magic-negating eye on him. In truth, he didn't fear its other eyes, knowing his magic and inner strength would protect him. Pulling his Cloak of Flies around him, calling the Shadows of Moil, assuming his ghostly form and surrounding himself with mirror images, he acted swiftly, knowing if he failed he was doomed. He rushed the creature from behind where its central eye could not focus on him and struck it repeatedly with his halberd. Filling it with fear and freezing it in place, he willed a mighty smite into the blow. Unable to turn because of its terror, the creature pivoted his other eye stalks at him, but his aura of protection blocked the few beams that managed to strike him. Again and again he struck, piling radiant and necrotic damage on the aberration, watching its flesh burn and decay at the same time. His Aura of Conquest tore at the beast's mind while his Cloak of Flies devoured its body. In mere moments the Eye Tyrant was dead, and he fled down the spiraling street before its brothers could come for him. He wasn't running aimlessly, he had a destination in mind, a place that would shelter him from the Cardinal's scrying. Assuming he was welcomed, something he was not sure of, but he hoped that killing the Beholder would earn him the friendships of the Sisterhood. He quickly ducked into their chapter house and was greeted by armed men and women. He dropped his weapon and asked for shelter, but it wasn't necessary. The members were already aware of who he was and what he had done, and quickly ushered him into their shrine where he could be hidden and protected. At 16th level, he becomes an 8th level Warlock, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Tough feat, adding 2 hit points for every level he has and for every level he gains. For most characters, we would recommend raising his Constitution to 16 to help with saving throws and concentration checks, as well as hit points, but as a Paladin he has his Aura Protection to help with those, so he really just needs the hit points. He can also learn another spell of up to 4th level and takes Dimension Door. He also retrains Summon Undead for Spirit of Death. This is a new spell from the Book of Many Things. The spirit it summons is smarter and more powerful than the ghost he can call with Summon Undead, and it has the ability to track its target. At 17th level, he becomes a 9th level Warlock. His Pact magic slots become 5th level, and he can learn another spell that can be 5th level, and he learns Hold Monster. As we said earlier with Hold Person, any hit on a paralyzed enemy is a critical hit, which doubles the number of all damage dice rolled, such as Hex, Grasp of Avarice, Divine Smite, etc. Now he can use this on most creatures, not just humanoids. He also gains another Invocation. He takes Whispers of the Grave, allowing him to cast Speak with Dead at will without using a spell slot. This will give him access to lots of information, and since he also has access to Zone of Truth, Persuasion, and Intimidation proficiency, the Friend Cantrip, and Cloak of Flies, he should be able to get accurate answers. He can also retrain a spell, and since he no longer needs Speak with Dead, he will retrain it for Synaptic Static, which is not only a good area effect damage spell, it also hampers enemies damaged by it. At 18th level, he becomes a 10th level Warlock. He learns another cantrip and chooses Minor Illusion. It is a useful and versatile cantrip. There are a lot of situations where a simple illusion can solve a problem that would otherwise be difficult. His patron makes him a Necrotic Husk. He already has resistance to necrotic damage, but now when he's using his form of dread, he is immune to necrotic damage. In addition, when he's reduced to 0 hit points, he can instead use his reaction to drop to 1 hit point instead. When he does, each creature within 30 feet takes necrotic damage equal to 2d10 plus his Warlock level. Afterwards, he gains a level of exhaustion and can't use this reaction again until he completes 1d4 long rests.
The Sisterhood shelters him for a time, protecting him from scrying and divination. The diviners among the Sisterhood cast omens and are assured that his identity has not been exposed. He had thought that he would need to introduce himself to the chapter house, but they were well aware of him and his activities. Contrary to the name, the Sisterhood was comprised of both men and women. They are one of the few forces of good in Hopeless, and the only one to operate openly. They provide aid and healing to those in need. Surprisingly, this does not always make them popular with the people. They are often reviled and hated by the people for their good nature. One of the sisters conversed with him while he was secluded. She wanted to know what he was trying to accomplish. He told them of his patron and how he worked to keep the city from being absorbed into Hades by opposing the evil of the High Cardinal, how he wished to help the suffering of the weak and the helpless, and that he ultimately wanted to bring down Thingol the Mocker and end her reign of cruelty. The sister understood this and asked how he intended to proceed. He thought that at first he must destroy the Beholders, and he must amass forces to deal with the Mocker's soldiers and then face the wizard in battle. The sister found his plans simplistic and told him so. She detailed all the defenses the High Cardinal had and the resources. Our hero despaired, feeling foolish. So there is no hope in Hopeless, he said. The sister smiled and told him that there is hope, but success will require more than he can achieve on his own. She tells him that the chapter house has resources as well. They also have allies in the city who would rise up for the right leader. The diviners suggest that he might be that leader. She asks him if he is prepared to take on the mantle of High Cardinal and the burden of ruling Hopeless. Our hero had not considered this before and had no desire to rule, but he asked, would the people follow me? The sister said that she believed so. They would never accept one of the Sisterhood as a ruler, but a powerful Death Knight who overthrew the High Cardinal could gain their loyalty. She tells him that he would need to rule with an iron fist and tolerate no dissent, but he could gradually introduce reforms to ease the suffering of the people, end the worst of the cruelties, and draw the city away from the embrace of Hades. He agreed to take on the mantle if that was the only way. The sister then called the rest of the chapter house to begin their plan. At 19th level, he becomes an 11th level Warlock. He gains a third pact magic slot and can learn a magic arcanum. This is a spell of 6th level from the Warlock list that he can cast once per long rest without expending a spell slot. He chooses Create Undead, which will allow him to turn 3 corpses into ghouls under his command. The ghouls remain under his control for 24 hours, at which time he must cast this again to retain control over them. At 20th level, he becomes a 12th level Warlock, getting another ability score improvement or a feat, and he increases his charisma to 20. Strength would also be a good choice, but charisma impacts so many of his abilities, it is the best choice. He also is granted another invocation, and he takes Voice of the Chainmaster, allowing him to communicate telepathically with his familiar and perceive through its senses. He can also speak to familiar using his own voice.
The planning took years, during which time he did kill 3 more of the Beholders and many other of the High Cardinal's minions. The Sisterhood ensured that the legend of the Vigilante grew and spread. Bards told stories and rumor mongers speculated on who the unseen killer might be. When whispers began that the Vigilante was seeking to overthrow the High Cardinal, cells began to form of people wanting to join the cause. Slowly, agents of the Sisterhood pulled these cells together, creating a network. One by one, he began meeting with the leaders of these cells, revealing his identity and gaining their loyalty for the day of revolution. When the day came, the quiet, slothful town of Hopeless exploded into violence. Warriors of many races clashed in the streets. Priests and wizards who had kept their powers hidden from the Grand Cardinal stood alongside warriors and assassins, battling the Beholders and other creatures loyal to the Mocker. Finally, with the chapter house at his side, he entered the Tower of the Mocker to fight the final battle and destroy the evil wizard. For those of you who have been watching this channel for a while, you might have noticed that this is sort of a rework of one of our oldest builds, called Vlad the Impaler. That build was a favorite of ours, but since we made it, there's been new material released, and we have learned a lot as well. The Planescape material gave us new ideas and an opportunity to update this build and give it new life. This is a very powerful character, having many ways to cripple his enemies. He can lock them down with fear, paralyze them with holds, and blind them with darkness. He can deal huge amounts of damage and is very difficult to kill. His main weakness is he relies on concentration spells for fear, darkness, holds, and summoning, so he needs to select a tactic and stick to it. That isn't all that much of a drawback, because he has tactics for a wide variety of situations. He is also a good leader with high charisma, persuasion, and intimidation. He is also self-reliant, providing his own protection, healing, and support. He is powerful both in melee and at range, and has some strong area of effect attacks as well. His familiar gives him a reliable scout and can be a strong ally in battle. Its attacks are not always needed, but just invisibly using the help action each turn gives its master a huge advantage in combat. We hope you enjoyed this character and will tell us about it in the comments, along with any questions, suggestions, or build ideas, and join us next time when we continue exploring the Outlands. Until then, cheers!